Having said that, I will remind the candidates that we are using a timing system. The yellow card means 15 seconds, the red card means your time is up. I am now going to roll into our first question, and I will let you know in advance if it's a 2-minute question or if it's a 1-minute response question. The panelists also have a couple of questions. They will do the same as they are asking their questions. So question number 1, thank you for that segue, Mr. Williams, on the Sewage and Water Board. So the August 5th flooding revealed all the problems that Jason just talked about. Our infrastructure, which we thought was in great working shape after millions and billions of dollars post-Katrina, it's been proven otherwise. And more recently, or just as recently, many of us have gotten bills that make no sense. We're being overcharged. They tell us to pay the bill, or our bills, or our water will be cut off, and then they take months to solve the problem if they've solved it yet in any particular person's case. And so the question is, and this is a 2-minute response question for all the candidates, and we will start with Jason, given that Jared opened up the introductions. As a newly elected council person, what are your thoughts on this topic, the broken sewage and water board system, both its infrastructure and its actual management practices? And what will you do to address citizens' concerns around the sewage and water board system?
Thank you, Julius. First and foremost, that Saturday that water came down and stayed in our streets, I was in the community. I went out in the Tremay, in Lakeview, Broad Street, to see what I could do to help. And I was able to talk to people and really find out what was going on. There was a common theme between everyone that the water did not go down until about 9:30, and when it went down very quick. So it was very clear that someone was lying about the pumps being turned on, about them being 100% operational. I called them on it. We had an emergency meeting. I caught people in lies. They were fired. That's not enough. The problem's not fixed. We will continue to have special meetings to hold the Sewage and Water Board accountable. That's not enough. I've requested that the mayor, and he has agreed to put on an RFQ for an independent third-party evaluation of the Sewage and Water Board to judge it from top to bottom, to do an autopsy of what has happened with the Sewage and Water Board over the course of 3 decades, to talk about whether or not our governance and organizational structure is proper, adequate, and smart, meaning having DPW under city control and having Sewage and Water Board and under separate control. I think it's silly, but I want to hear from a third party to hear what they think about it. I've also asked for a forensic audit to know how every single dime has been spent since Hurricane Katrina and since those federal dollars have come. I plan on moving forward, requesting that there be a 1-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and 20-year plan to come from this current mayor and whoever the next mayor is, to make sure that we don't do things in terms of a 4-year election cycle, but do things for the community that we can depend on, that sometimes takes more than 4 years.
Thank you.
Well, I can definitely speak from experience as far as getting crazy bills from Sewage and Water Board. It was about 6 years ago, a bill for $1,200 for 1 month of use. It took me about 4 months to resolve that, but still to this day, I've been getting double charged on my sanitation fee because I have a double, and the downstairs has been unoccupied since Katrina, and they still charge me the double rate, and it's really a quadruple rate because they doubled the sanitation fees right after Katrina. And so I definitely have some frustration with the Sewage and Water Board. I've been saying from the very start of this campaign that I agreed with the Office of Inspector General that the Sewage and Water Board should be under city control. I will definitely fight for that under my first term as city councilman. Beyond that, I've also advocated for increased transparency and audits, and that is the function of the Office of Inspector General. Currently, the Office of Inspector General has less than 2/3 of 1% of the city general fund, which is the money that's left over after all the other monies get allotted. And for a budget that's close to $1 billion, They're talking about the Catalonian vote in Spain, and Spain has a budget of $4 billion for their federal government. So the city of New Orleans has a budget 1/4 the size of a major European Union country, and for what we're putting into our oversight and our auditing, that is just a drop in the bucket. And so I propose 6-tupling of the Office of Inspector General. I think we need to do at least 3% of that general fund. Their stated mission is to root out corruption and waste, and to forward any illegal doing to prosecution. And so I think for many of our citizens who've been paying excessive rates over and over, and we're not seeing where our tax dollars and our fee structures are going to, I think that's the first step as a city government official in getting confidence back. But I think we need to have the city taking control of sewage and water boards so we can coordinate all of our repairs. Right now, there are lead pipes all over the city delivering water. I do not want us to become another Flint, Michigan. I pledge to remove those all by 2025, and you need to coordinate with the other agencies so we're not re-ripping the roads.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
This political machine is not working for our city. It's not good for our city. There's too much crime and corruption going on. $158 billion went through the sewage and water board, and we still have problems. First, I would take the sewage and water board and abolish that board. I would merge the agency with the public works department so that we have one agency operating, so the right hand would know what the left hand is doing. Too many times, the sewage and water board go out and do a job in our streets. Then the public works come out and do the same job in the same area, so they dig up their work and start all over again. It's costing us money. It's wasting a lot of government funds, and I would definitely eliminate the government waste in our government. Then the issues that our state representative went through the back door to remove the council members off the city hall. Off the sewage and water board. I would put the council members back and put the sewage and water board and the Department of Public Works under the control of City Hall, so that we can have some type of accountability, and so that people no longer have a fear to leave their homes when it rains. Because right now, people are afraid to leave their home. Yesterday, we flooded. This is totally unacceptable. And we need a council person going to make a tough decision and take a stand and be against this type of corruption, crime in our community and in our government.
Just to qualify, I'm not the state rep he's talking about. It's the one who's not here. Just want us to be clear about that. The issue, as I understand it, is one of transparency, accountability, and governance. It is true that in 2013, when legislation was offered to remove councilpersons from the operation or the actual membership on that board, you actually negated and compromised the integrity of accountability for the citizens, because that was your and our only mechanism for accountability to see what that board was doing operationally. However, we still had a regulatory responsibility. So service agreements could have been established to simply say, how many catch basins did you clean this month? Or how many did you clean? We dropped the ball on that piece, in my opinion. And so clearly the issue of accountability and transparency is one. And for me, I'm interested in considering where that board should be. There are various proposals that have been floated around, such as making it a department within City Hall, also looking at private-public partnerships. As one who is an administrator and planner, I'm interested in those issues being on the table. The other issue is funding for the particular projects itself, in terms of what we need to do to bring our sewage and water board up to date. You've heard things like a stormwater fee. I'm not in favor of any more fees for the citizens. You've been feed and taxed to death. We don't need any more fees. What I'm interested in looking at is partnering with the federal government, specifically through the SELA project, the Southeastern Louisiana Drainage Project. They've invested some $142 million here. Now here's the issue. It makes sense for the federal government to partner with us, because if we flood, the river and the highways shut down. That's multi-billion dollars. And so we should be able to go to the federal government and talk about a partnership to truly make our sewage and water board the best water system, drainage system we can have.
So this is a public safety issue, right? Unlike crime and policing, however, it doesn't discriminate. Everyone gets affected by our failing infrastructure when it comes to sewage and water board and drainage, right? Personally, I was working a fundraiser for my day job at the Contemporary Arts Center in the Warehouse Arts District on August 5th. And we did about a third of the revenues we had projected for our biggest fundraiser of the year because of the weather. Now look, that's not much of a hardship, right? We present visual and performing arts, but it impacts certain communities. It impacts artists in our communities, right? Now my department at work is tasked with making that money up over the next part of this fiscal year. And I'm gonna do it, because it's my job. But again, it's a public safety issue. I had people that couldn't get to work that I had hired that day to help produce this fundraiser. And I told them to stay home. I told them to not get to their cars. It's a safety issue. I agree with what many people have said so far today, which is that City Hall needs to have oversight of the Sewage and Water Board. I think it was a mistake to remove City Hall from the board, city council persons, 2014, I believe, and in 2016, the recently retired Inspector General called it out. 2 years, a year and a half before these last two floods happened. He said, we've got a problem. There's too much money being spent and no oversight, and therefore we have fraud and corruption and criminal activity running this department. I don't know who's doing it. I'm not that smart or experienced, but I think it's pretty clear. We need coordination with governance, accountability, and transparency, moving ahead, because our citizens deserve it.
Thank you, Joe. It's unacceptable. What we're seeing at Sewage and Water Board, day by day we're being lied to. It's unacceptable to the public. It's a administrative and executive branch failure. Now, the reform legislation that passed in 2012, that was also passed the State House, State Senate, and the voters of New Orleans voted on it. And so I would reiterate about being an informed voter when going vote on these amendments. The other issue is it's definitely a public safety issue. I'm upset with how civil service operates. Councilmember Williams mentioned the slowness earlier, and I would support a bill to bypass civil service because 300 vacancies is unacceptable, and that is why it's a public safety issue. I worked and asked the interim director of Sewage and Water Board, I said, citizens should not be charged if they paid a Sewage and Water Board bill online. I got confirmation last week that those charges have now been removed. I'll continue to push for accountability and transparency. If it remains a state-created entity, then a state rep and the state senator also need to be on the board with the president of the board, which is the mayor. I'm open to having council members back on, but I will continue fighting for the citizens of New Orleans. But those 300 vacancies, that's a major part of the problem, and that has to change.
Thank you all. And so moving on to our next topic, a number of you touched upon how the city pays for the Sewage and Water Board, our drainage issues, infrastructure, and how money gets to the general fund in the city of New Orleans. A lot of those dollars are real estate taxes. And so the observation and then question. Many of us know that the paper and other sources tell us that approximately 60% of the real estate in New Orleans is untaxed, either because it's owned by a university, it's owned by a nonprofit, or it is owned by a religious institution or some other civic organization of that sort. Now, the same research also tells us that much of that real estate, while it's owned by a nonprofit, it's owned by a religious organization, is actually in commerce as a private use, and it's earning a profit for those organizations that own it. And the question is, and we'll start again with Jared. We request a 2-minute response. The question is, What do you guys think about the way we tax ourselves, and what would you do to address the matter? And this is an issue of equity and fairness, quite frankly.
It's equity, fairness, and you see what's happening in housing as it relates to short-term rentals. That's why I voted against short-term rentals, because it didn't go, the enforcement didn't go far enough. People's taxes are going, the property taxes are going up. What I would support differently, as I've done when I was a state legislator, I think we have to look at the nonprofits that are using our streets, our infrastructure for commercial purposes. And everybody has to share in paying for the city services. Excuse me, that would also take an act of the legislature as well.
Thanks, Jared. I agree, generally speaking, with that assessment regarding nonprofits. You know, we need to look at where revenue is coming into our city, and we shouldn't feel beholden to traditions of government and how we tax nonprofit organizations, because that's how we've always done it. That's one of the things that I kind of want to get away from, is how we've always done it. And I'd even like to look at my own nonprofit that I work for, and I might get they might slap me on the wrist for saying, hey, maybe the Contemporary Arts Center needs to pay some taxes because we make some money, you know? I mean, we make some money and then put it back into the performing and visual arts and public education and programming and do good work. But all these organizations that do good work that are making a profit, need to be paying taxes too, because that's a lot of land you're talking about, right? I think we need, in terms of just regular folks, I think we need to increase the homestead exemption to bring down some taxes on some folks so that they aren't displaced from their neighborhoods. And I think we have to be much more stringent with short-term rentals in terms of regulation and developers coming in and purchasing properties just for short-term rentals. We got to put a stop to that. And we got to tax them like we tax our hotel industry, right? Thank you.
You know, when there's an issue of money and the issue is need, we should be cautious about how we go about trying to raise revenues. The whole purpose of a nonprofit is to have a tax exempt status, because they're not allowed to make a profit. Any monies they make actually is supposed to go back to the program for services they render. However, if we learn that there are nonprofits who actually are making a profit and with a commercial piece, then I think we can adjust that. But here's where I think we need to look to understand revenue. We need to look at rededicating some of the taxes we collect. For instance, we have some dedications where, and I'll give one example, Convention Center. Convention Center gets $50 million a year, and there's a surplus of $229 million. Now that to me makes no sense. At a time we have needs of 30 to 35 million to maintain our streets, 30 to 35 million to deal with our sewage and our water issues. We have money. And what we need to do is to carefully re-examine some rededications. But I am in favor of looking at nonprofits that actually benefit if they have commercial uses.
I used to work for a nonprofit, Kingsley House. And so I know some nonprofits are very small. So they deserve the taxes there. But the ones that are bigger and using the property for other purpose besides the main purpose, like the university may own several properties throughout the city. Some churches may own several properties throughout the city. So, you know, that tax exempt should be only for that facility, that one facility only, and not for every facility they own. And so I am against multi-use property being exempt because it's under the umbrella of a nonprofit facility. Now, agencies like King's House and small agencies, yes, they deserve it because they're doing good. They're helping to fight the poverty and the crime and the welfare in our community, and they depend upon government grants and state grants and city grants, so they need some type of help when it comes down to the taxes. Now, as far as real estate property is concerned, we should take the real estate, the city real estate, and make homeowners out of it. And for every home that we create, we generate new taxes, new property taxes for the city of New Orleans. We own 50,000 blighted property in this city. Let's make homeowners out of that blighted property. And for every property that we generate, not only can we collect new taxes, but we can take the sale of that property and pay off all the judgments that the city is facing, like for the fire and other people who have judgment claims. As far as the motel, the Airbnb, it's wrong to motel our neighborhoods for the tourists. We should let the tourists stay in the hotels downtown and leave our neighborhoods for the neighbors. That's a public safety issue. It's not only for the elderly, but for young families. We don't know the people, if the person in the area is available, is criminal or what. But it's wrong. It's a public safety. Thank you.
So I think the reason why the stormwater drainage fee has become such a prominent talking point among a lot of the mayoral hopefuls is because, as you said, 60% of these properties are non-taxed, but as Councilman Brossett said, that's going to take an act of the state legislature to change. And personally, as a citizen of New Orleans that decided to run for office in city government, I have been extremely disappointed in Louisiana state legislature, and I don't want to hedge any bets on that. But like legislator Doc Bouie, I am against the stormwater drainage fees, specifically because I feel that one, our citizens are overfeed and taxed, but beyond that, I think it's a fundamental flaw to think of millions, if not billions, of fresh water falling from the sky as a waste product instead of the precious resource that it is. That's when I'm talking about 20th century thinking instead of 21st century thinking. But when it comes to the way that we're taxed, obviously, Mr. Bouie made a good example about some of the allotments that we have, from our hotel tax or airport landing tax. A lot of those allotments go specifically towards boosting tourism. Tourism brought in $7 billion this past year, 10.5 million unique visitors. Obviously, as far as it goes, I think if there are vested interests that want to bring those tourists, whether it's the Sugar Bowl or it's Marriott or Hyatt, they can spend their own advertising dollars, and we can take those tax dollars and start spending into our communities. So there is a way where you can re-allot the $1 billion in tax revenue that we're raising. But then beyond that, there's other ways that you can raise funds that would put the onus on visitors as opposed to the residents. First, I proposed a property tax millage freeze, but to properly fund our street maintenance, I proposed a fuel tax surcharge, because when you have 10.5 million visitors, many of them driving from Texas, Alabama, those are people who are going to be buying and paying tax towards our road maintenance instead of constantly putting the onus on the residents.
Julius, your comment was very astute, and I 110% agree with tax fairness. The idea that the Archdiocese, the institution with most of the art in this world, is a nonprofit is just silly. The idea that Tulane University is not going to call our fire department or our police when they have a need is just silly. Harvard University doesn't pay property tax, but they pay a special assessment to that community because they know they're relying on city needs. So I am 110% behind that. I can tell you I've been pushing our local delegation to help us with that in Baton Rouge. I've committed myself to going to Baton Rouge, to the Capitol, to lobby for that change, because that can make a really big difference in the city of New Orleans. And I talked to the presidents of at least 2 universities. When Dr. Fritz came into Tulane as a new president, it was the first conversation we had. And they realize that tax fairness is important. But also, when you look at all the needs that we have in the city of New Orleans, we have to have a new revenue stream. And leaving money on the table for institutions that are making money as nonprofits is nonsensical. And I think Joe Bouie is absolutely right about rededicating some other taxes that are already in place, because that is also leaving money on the table and off the books of our critical needs of our community.
Thank you, guys. And we are doing really good with the 2-minute thing. You all are succinct and thoughtful. Much appreciated. The next question is on a topic a number of you all touched upon, short-term rentals. And so we all remember the debate we had as a community around short-term rentals. One of the big concerns was corporate interests and corporations and for-profit entities exploiting the rules as they were created, as opposed to regular citizens like you and I renting out a room or the other half of our double, something to that effect. That many people are concerned that that is not happening. This is a question directly for at-large Division 2. So David and Jason, the question is, how would you all change the current system? And in particular, what's your position on linking the short-term rentals to homestead exemptions where the owner has that exemption in his or her name?
Very good question. I would say that short-term rentals throughout the world are a very tricky problem. We knew it was a tricky problem when we were trying to deal with it, when we came up with this initial imperfect legislation. The one strong thing that we did in our community, which didn't exist in any other place in the world, is that we required that they linked their data and shared their data with the city of New Orleans. The reason that's so essential, if we had said we want to end short-term rentals in the city of New Orleans, we do not have the funding structure or organization or infrastructure to stop it. We could not have ended it. It would have been an empty threat. So by now having that data, if we, in working with different communities, find out that it's having a detrimental impact, we are now in a position to take action because we know who owns the property, who's renting the property, and we can address it. And we have the enforcement mechanism to do that. I think linking the homestead exemption to it prior to getting that data would not have given us the results we need. Now that we have the data, there are a number of changes that have to happen to make sure that short-term rentals don't have a detrimental impact to our community. What I would suggest that we do moving forward, though, is look at the impact they're having in each neighborhood. Talk to the neighbors, find out if it's a problem in a certain neighborhood. Every neighborhood does not have to have the exact same structure. There might be certain communities that could benefit from the investment, the revitalization of a blighted piece of property, bringing it into commerce. But there are certain communities where it is going to have a harmful impact. And I think we need to deal with them on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, listening to the community to have that impact.
I would specifically say that everyone in the city is recognizing, I think at this point, that the skyrocketing rent rates and lack of housing affordability is directly, more than any other factor, of course there's other factors, but more than any other factor, short-term rentals are what drives these higher rent rates. It's also driving longtime community members out of their community because in the cash grab to snatch up these properties, people's assessments have gone up and they can't afford to pay their property taxes with millages increasing on their fixed incomes. But I have a friend in the audience who has her own Airbnb. She bought her shotgun and renovated it and rented out one side. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. If we're talking about the 21st century, short-term rentals are here to stay. So the trick is trying to figure out a way where you're rewarding people who are investing in their own property and are trying to navigate this complex economy that we have where people are having less and less while they're working more and more. The whole share economy, I think, is a direct result of failed legislation on a national basis for the last 50 years. But going to the homestead exemption requirement, I think, is absolutely crucial. You see with Airbnbs that a vast majority, over 80% of them, are owned by people that own more than a dozen properties. Many of them are foreign nationals. You see that these investments are coming from China, Russia, Venezuela. People are using these monies from their own corruption in their own states to then buy up properties in New Orleans. And when it comes down to it, New Orleans has the monopoly on being New Orleans. We will always be a tourist destination in the world because we are a culture bearer of the world. And so you can't necessarily get rid of that short-term program, but we have to have some sort of teeth in the regulation. We have to have a homestead exemption tied to it. And I think that if people see that there are fines and fees that are actually quite fierce for disrespecting and disregarding that regulation, then I think you'll see rental rates going down as some of these illegal Airbnbs come off the market.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you very much for your answers. The next question, number 4, is for Division D only, and you'll have 1 minute for response. Years of community engagement and work went into the comprehensive zoning ordinance. And neighborhoods are concerned when properties, especially larger developments, are granted zoning variances with provisos attached. The community has to take their own time to engage in a long process to achieve provisos to protect their neighborhoods. Often these provisos are not complied with nor enforced by the city. What steps will you take to address the zoning variance process, proviso compliance, and enforcement?
I'll take it. I look at an organization like MACNAM, Music and Culture Coalition New Orleans, and see what they're doing with zoning. And I think it's a model in our community of community advocates. During this process of running for city council, one of the things that's inspired me is the advocacy groups in our community who are doing the work that maybe has failed the community from a municipal level to some degree in our local politics. And I think looking at zoning is something that MACNO is doing a really good job at, and amending the city's master plan towards decreasing big developers coming in and buying up a ton of property, but allowing our cultural bear incubators, our music clubs and venues, our places where our cultural traditions lie, and that we need to sustain and support and grow moving forward. That's all has to do with our zoning ordinance, and I think we got to start with our culture and not outside developers.
Thank you. I've worked well with the neighborhood associations in District D. There's something called, part of the comprehensive zoning ordinance, called the neighborhood participation process. And I encourage all citizens to be part of that as you see development come to your community. I can take Esplanade Ridge, for example, the Joan Mitchell Foundation, which is a great development in the district along Bayou Road. But in a week and a half, we all in this room are going to vote for a mayor. And the administration has to enforce. Lawmakers, legislators, we pass the law, but you have to have an administration to enforce. That has somewhat lacked in respect to what you mentioned with the provisos. That has to be done from the executive side. Thank you.
Thank you all. And we actually have another question that touches upon the provisos, and it is for District D as well. What defines much of this neighborhood is our beloved racetrack, the Fairgrounds. In 2005, the Fairgrounds became a slot facility. When that legislation was passed, there were lots of negotiations with the community and with the city council, and provisos were put in place. The Fairgrounds committed to extra patrolling, security and safety patrols, which are staffed by NOPD. The racetrack committed to additional landscaping and light mitigation enhancements to just generally prevent the increased hours from intruding upon the quality of life in surrounding neighborhoods. In addition, the Fairgrounds Citizens Committee was created to facilitate communication between the neighborhoods and the fairgrounds itself. And there is a lot of question as to whether or not that committee operates transparently. And so the question is, Division D, what are your thoughts about that legislation and the way it's being implemented and the enforcement of the provisos?
The Fairgrounds is currently in District A. District D is across the street. I do have an appointment to the Citizen Advisory Committee. If anything is being non-transparent or non-accountable to the people, I want all boards and commissions to be accountable. Also, Fairgrounds is part of state legislation as well. So I'll continue to work with this Councilmember Guidry, and hopefully in the next council to address any issues with the fairgrounds.
I think it gets, again, back to transparency and openness and accountability for the neighborhood associations that are working with the track. I'm also in District D, but I'm about a stone's throw from the track, right across from Gentile Stallings Park. And I think as the folks who operate and own the fairgrounds come to the community and ask for, say, extended hours or other ways that they want to further their revenue and development, we have to hold their feet to the fire. And before we do any negotiating with them, we have to make them do what they've already told us they're gonna do, which you alluded to, which is increase patrolling and landscape development. Things that they're not currently, they're not living up to their end of the bargain, as far as I know. I think we could also take it a little bit further, going back to the SWB is making the track be sort of a bearer of environmental sustainability in terms of water filtration and stormwater filtration and diversion and retaining it, as opposed to trying to pump it out. That's something I want to bring to the table with those guys. When they come to the table and say, here's the next thing we want from you, we've got to make sure they're doing something for us and holding up their end of the bargain.
I think the next thing they want is to increase the hours at which their slots are available. One thing I want to highlight before we go to the next question from the Fairgrounds Triangle neighborhood, over and over again we've heard how critical, how much the state and our legislators matter in regards to governing and management of a lot of infrastructure in parts of our city. That we're talking to these city council candidates about these things, and in some cases they have direct influence, and others it's mostly a bully pulpit and them coordinating with our state reps and senators to try to make things happen. And I just want to highlight that. That's critical.
Thank you, Julius. Morgan Clevenger, Fairgrounds Triangle Neighborhood Association. The Fairgrounds Race Course is the big elephant in the room for our neighborhoods, and those hard-won provisos are very important. The patrol has not been productive. The other provisos there's a lot of concern they're not being fulfilled. As we move forward, we recently found that in addition to the neighborhood level commitments they also made a commitment to pay the state of Louisiana tax dedicated funds that do not flow into this community. In fact, there's almost nothing from the fairgrounds that flows into this community. And we have been the welcome committee for 40 years of Jazz Fest. We are the front yard of the fairgrounds and the side yard and the backyard and the parking lot and the Pea Palace. So we want to know where that money goes and how do we ask our city council representatives to work with our state legislatures to achieve a piece of that pot. Now this question is for Division 1 candidates, and you have 2 minutes each for the response. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think in 2016, the amount that was forwarded to the state from the fairgrounds was about $6 million. And the dedications, as I remember, really do omit any kinds of allocation to the neighborhoods. For instance, I know that Benson gets almost $2 million.
Tom Benson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Tom Benson?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think? And then City Park gets $1 million. And then Algiers Development District gets about $100,000. And the reason I kind of know these numbers is because somebody tried to do a money grab, if you will. And I happened to be the rep for the fairgrounds. And when I saw the bill, I was saying, how is this person trying to deal with some of this dedicated money like this? And so we were able to kill that bill. But in terms of how we could reallocate that. I think it would be a huge effort, but I think it's a necessary effort, because at the time, commitments were made to save Tom Benson and the Saints. It was at a time when it was an incentive for him to have the Saints in New Orleans. But that was a long time ago. He's making serious money now, so we need to do something with rededicating that money. You know, it's similar to my statement I made earlier. We have these dedications that make no sense at all when we have such dire needs in the neighborhoods. So an effort on the part of council, mayor, and the legislative delegation could make that happen.
Well, all I can tell you, I will use my office to help lobby the state legislature and the senators to make sure that we reallocate or rededicate those funds to the community. Maybe we need to create our own development district in this area so that the taxes can go directly to the community, and the community will have a say-so in what to do with the funds. Because that's one of the biggest issues that I'm looking at. When my group put together the St. Thomas Housing Redevelopment, we took the Walmart retail and we tipped it. We took the taxes from Walmart and paid for that $360 million development. We could do the same thing with this project. We could take the taxes from the racetrack and pay for the development and security and the public safety for this community. This is my understanding of what I can see that I can do as a council is by using my office to lobby the senators and the representatives to make sure that they do their job for the people in the community.
Just a little small follow-up. I just thought of something. There is a Gentilly Development District, and it had a very small revenue stream. And when I became the state rep replacing Councilman Jared Brossett, we both sit on that Gentilly Development District, and one of the things we attempted to do is to shift that money to the Gentilly Development District, which would have allowed an allocation to come to this particular neighborhood. But it was killed, and so we're still working on that. But that's the kind of opportunity that is there to be able to reallocate. For last year, $6 million that went to those various entities.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all. So the next question was emailed to us. It is directly from one of our fellow citizens, and I'm going to read it directly so that we capture the spirit of it without missing anything. Citizens are concerned that the Claiborne Corridor Innovation District's proposed plan currently does not meet all regulatory requirements, environmental and historic reviews, zoning standards, and permitting procedures as other developments and businesses are required to do. Will you, and this is a question for each of you, we're looking for a 1-minute response, will you advocate for a fast-track process that would sidestep public engagement, zoning laws, building codes, and other applicable regulations, given that many people agree that the proposed innovation district is a critical economic development project in the long neglected Claiborne corridor? Or would you push for compliance with the existing zoning and other laws that are in place?
Thank you, Julius, for that important question. We received a $850,000 grant. It's been approved by the city as well as the state. We just did the site control ordinance with the State Department of Transportation and Development. No, I don't support any sidestepping of any zoning laws or community participation. That day in the council chamber was an overwhelming number of support of small businesses along that corridor to increase economic development, to increase commerce, and I'm glad to support it. Thank you.
In short, no. I think we probably need to slow our roll for a second on this and engage the public community, the small businesses, and make sure that something that's going to be this impactful on our community and our economic development takes the voices of our community into light and view, and let's talk to everybody and how this is going to affect everybody in our community.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, my perspective about economic development simply ensures the extent to which the residents participate in the production and distribution of goods and services. So I clearly would not be in favor of anything that would negate or try to compromise the participation of the residents at an entrepreneur or an employee level. One of the planks on my platform is investing in neighborhood wealth. And that's unfortunately what we have not done over the years. So any developer that's interested in doing anything in the city would have to have as a part of their plan how residents would benefit as entrepreneurs or as employees.
My campaign is about more jobs, more opportunity, more business development. But it's also about the people. The voice of the people must be the voice of government. So if the people is in support of it, I will support it. If the people is against it, I will be against it. It's not what I think is good for the community, it's what the people in the community feel is what is good for the community. And that's the stand I would take on every issue concerning the communities in the city of New Orleans.
I think a lot of times when you hear fast track, a lot of people try to spin that as like cutting government bureaucracy, but when we're talking fast track, we're also talking about eliminating community outreach. And I personally, every time I call City Hall, you get disconnected or reconnected 28 times. The City Hall meetings are usually held during general work hours. It's very hard to participate and give input as a resident with the way that the current process goes. So to fast track it at all, I think would be to even cut out the few people who manage to work around the rigmarole to actually get involved in the room and at the table. But obviously I think the grant was a wonderful boon for the city, and I definitely want to pursue that, but if there are economic and neighborhood concerns, we need to hear them out at the table openly and transparently before we move forward.
I absolutely believe that reinvestment in the Claiborne corridor, an area in which oak trees were cut down and overpass was put down and businesses were shuttered, that revitalization is critical and vital and important, and getting federal grant money to do it is exciting. However, it should not be pit against community participation. We can do both. We can revitalize that area, we can work fast, and we can also have community participation in that process. I think that answers that question. I say if there was something I could fast track, though, I would fast track an IKEA in New Orleans East, a Bass Pro Shop. If we could get Amazon, I would fast track that, and I would take care of the community outreach myself, even if I had to work overnight to get it done.
Thank you all. So the next question is from the 7th Ward Neighborhood Association.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. All right, Black Creole culture practices from jazz and rhythm and blues, gospel to social and pleasure clubs, who promoted the development of Black music by historically paying musicians to parade, are the main tourist attraction for our beloved New Orleans and Louisiana. Yet, these self-sacrificing and talented tradition bearers are the least to receive financial, civic, or legal support. The small Black parading groups, social and pleasure clubs, the Black Indians, are charged more than white large groups such as Rex, and are always rushed to complete their now prearranged routes, while white ones are not. What will each of you do to level access and provide real financial support to the smaller than Rex parading groups who are the lifeblood and cultural wealth of this community?
Actually, this is Jason start.
That's an excellent question. I can tell you I have a number of friends who are musicians in the community because as a young lawyer, I would work for musicians for free, pro bono, when they got in trouble in criminal district court because I knew they couldn't afford it. That being said, Glenn Andrews told me one day he was in a hotel room waiting to do a gig, and he saw a New Orleans tourism commercial with his likeness and his music he was not paid for it. And so to that end, I think we as a community have to look at what we use to promote ourselves. And we use the lowest paid folks in the community to do it. And so I can tell you that I have always been committed to making sure that where fees could be waived for the people we rely on so much, that is done, and it is consistently done. And we've recently been working on ways to institutionalize that. I think Ellis Marcellus said it best: in Europe, culture trickles down; in New Orleans, culture trickles up from the street.
Thank you. This is a 1-minute response question, by the way, gentlemen.
So I just had to finish a couple of questionnaires this weekend, and as soon as I got them out, I got an email, 3 more emails with questionnaires today. But as tired as I've been between working and campaigning, I feel every questionnaire I've gotten has made me a better candidate and more informed candidate. This question that the president of the 7th Ward Association just asked actually came up in the MACO, M-A-C-C-O questionnaire that I did a week or 2 ago. Specifically, I was not aware of that fee structure disparity. And I'll tell you that from my perspective, the fact that there is such a fee structure disparity sounds like it could be construed as decades, if not hundreds of years of systemic racism. So if the city doesn't want that to be perceived, then they need to correct that immediately. But as far as taking care of our culture bearers beyond supporting them in their parading, which you are right, does bring people into the city and carries on that cultural torch, I think we also work with social aid and pleasure clubs on mentorship programs with youth so they can pass on that torch to the next generation.
I'm glad you made the statement. Racism. Yes, that's the biggest issue. I truly believe that not only our culture and our entertainment, but the poor people as a whole is being discriminated against, is being denied opportunities. And that's because rich people are now making decisions about our community and how our community should grow. But the culture and tradition of the Indians and the second line has always been part of our life, our lifeline. We have always enjoyed. There should be no fees at all associated with them. They should have the opportunity to participate within the city. Now, if you're a tourist coming to the city, you like the second line or have a second line group, well, yes, we should charge them. But if you are a homegrown person, there should be waived and there should be no charge at all.
Yeah, I think Jason used the correct word, institutionalized. And clearly, and again, part of my platform is investing in community growth. The value of the culture of this city, we must institutionalize in terms of investing in that culture. So not only should we waive any fees, but we should also invest as a city in that particular entity, whether it's the Indians, whether it's the second line groups, because that is what New Orleans is. And for us to not invest in those groups and to misuse them in terms of charging them. I often think about the high school bands. You know, these kids, I mean, every parade they're out there. We give them a little small fee, and then when we look around, you know, the quality of our public education is disastrous. You know, so we really need to invest in what makes New Orleans what it is.
This is an issue near and dear to me. In fact, my biggest campaign event on my meager campaign funds was at the Family Ties Second Line on Sunday. I was talking to a culture writer, Jay Mazza, who's been around on the scene for like 30 years, not too long ago, and I asked him, you know, what's changed the most about the Second Line? He said, cars, flatly, quickly. I'm like, what do you mean cars? He said, well, people in the Social Aid and Pleasure Club don't live in the neighborhoods anymore. Mardi Gras Indians don't live in the neighborhoods anymore, in a lot of cases, right? Because they can't afford to. We gotta change that. And that gets into a whole other issue, and I only have a minute. But I want to say that what I would effort to do is to subsidize the fees that the Social Aid and Pleasure Clubs have to pay completely 100%, so not a dollar comes out of their pocket from the tourism industry. NOCBB, destination management companies. Look, to your point, David, we have an economic interest in this town, the tourism industry, hospitality industry, to be socially progressive. And that means taking care of our home. Systemic racism, with this disparity that we have between Mardi Gras crews and social aid and pleasure clubs, cannot stand. I think we can spin it into a positive, and that the Mardi Gras crews we can spin it so they see that they have an opportunity to subsidize and support the culture that happens in our communities all year round, not just during carnival season.
I will continue to support our social aid and pleasure clubs, our cultural bureaus, through financial assistance via grants. We're sitting in the neighborhood that I've supported a grant for. For example, Seals Class Act, their second line parade, of course, Zulu, and many more. But I'll continue to support financial assistance through those grants, and anybody is welcome to apply through the resources and the guidelines on the City Council's website. Thank you.
Thank you all. And last but not least, we have a question on crime. I will read this question. We're looking for 2-minute responses. We will start with Jared. Let me read the question. We often think immediately about NOPD when discussions of crime come up. However, all research tells us that crime prevention through community engagement, recreational and education opportunities for young people, a higher minimum wage, and other similar measures are all cheaper and more effective than more police. Beyond hiring more police, as a city council person, what initiatives would you recommend or pursue to directly or indirectly reduce crime in our city?
Thank you, Julius, for that very important question, and it's multi-pronged. I wrote the ordinance to pass the first living wage in our city's history, tied into inflation, $10.55, and 7 days paid sick leave. Those are the type of bold and progressive initiatives we need to see moving forward, and I'll continue to move forward progressive policies. I've supported the 10% pay raise when we came in 14, 15% pay raise, excuse me. We just announced one over the summer, another 10%. We have to continue to invest in our children, and that's recreation. St. Bernard Center, a over $1 million renovation. We're about to get started on Hardin Playground in the 7th Ward. We're about to get started on Hunters Field, as well as the Nora Navra Library, one of the last libraries in our structure, the last library to get restored after Hurricane Katrina, along with the other affordable housing projects along St. Bernard Avenue. The Milne Boys Home, millions of dollars. My work at the state legislature and then on the council, pushing that to get that facility back up and running in conjunction with my colleagues and my successor, Representative Joe Bouie. So we have to invest more in mental health, in adolescent health care, and increasing technology within the police department to focus on the serious criminals. I've supported enhancements in technology. I've supported COPS grants, federal funding for our police officers, even traveled, passed legislation resolution to support the grant, and we were awarded the grant under former Attorney General Eric Holder to pay that federal portion of our police officers. So thank you.
When I think about reducing crime and advocating for public safety, I think about first and foremost criminal justice reform. New Orleans is the most incarcerated city in the world per capita. I think public safety and crime reduction starts with us discontinuing throwing so many young black men in jail for misdemeanors, petty offenses, traffic violations. We've got to stop this cyclical thing where being a criminal becomes a career, right? We got to, and there are many things that Jared just said that I completely agree with, so I won't repeat them, but it's about systemic change with NORD and education, et cetera. technology. But what can we do? What's some low-hanging fruit right out of the gate? I think we can ban the box so that ex-incarcerated citizens have an easier time to get a job. I think that I want to stop driving to jail and ID into jail. If you report a crime, I don't think your ID should get run. I think citizens in Gentilly, I think, are scared to call the cops to report a crime because they don't want their ID to get run and end up in the OPP. And we can stop those things, right? That's low-hanging fruit I think we can deal with. While in long term addressing some of those systemic issues with education and opportunity for everyone and combating racial and socioeconomic inequity that plagues the city and our country.
Here's where I think my knowledge and skills will be a great asset to the council as a council at large person. As a social scientist, I understand that what we identify as the problem is really the symptom of the problem. And what we have to address is both cause and symptom. For instance, Jared alluded to some of the causes, that is the lack of employment opportunities. We have a situation where we have 44% of African American males unemployed. But we actually are creating an environment that causes crime in our city. For instance, with our dysfunctional public education system, we know we have 24,000 young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are both out of school and out of work. As a social scientist, I correlated that age group with those who are both victims and perpetrators of the crime we see every day. The same age, 16 and 24. So we must do something about our dysfunctional education system. And I can bring something to the table in that piece. The other issue is we must marry vocational and technical training with the market of jobs we have. You know, we talk about 350 positions of technicians and operators. Well, we're not talking about engineers, but we have Delgado, and as a former chancellor, I know we can develop any curriculum in the world. So why can't we develop a curriculum with Delgado and have a pipeline of operators and technicians to handle our sewage and water board problem? And in addition to that, we just know we just got $26 million to clean out the catch basins. And then the administration wants folk to volunteer. Well, why don't we allow these unemployed residents in the various neighborhoods, pay them to do these catch basins after we do the major parts of that? I'm simply saying we have resources but no vision. And so what you create is an environment that you have young people who are pushed out of schools, suspended and expelled, no employment opportunities. And so what do we expect? And so the issue is we must deal with both the cause and the symptom.
We need education, job training, high-paying technology jobs. We need to reduce the poverty and the welfare in our community. We need to increase our transit system so that people can get to work through the public transit system. The wait time should be no more than 15 minutes. We need to add 300 new buses. We need to eliminate all these out-of-state contractors and put the money back into the city and invest the money. We need to open up charity hospitals for our mentally ill, our drug citizens that are on drugs. We need to take our city real estate and sell it and make homeowners. We need to do a whole lot of things to eliminate this crime in the city. We have 200,000 males, African American males, out of work. But we are looking for police officers from other states. Let's tap into that resources. Let's give those guys a chance. Let's ban the box. Let's eliminate the background check. Everybody is not a criminal. Some people made mistakes. They deserve a second chance. But that's what we really need to do. We need to become more progressive in our thinking and the way we view how the city is going to move forward. And most importantly, we need to create the jobs that the people really need to eliminate the crime in our community, to eliminate the poverty, to eliminate the mass incarceration. And this is the real issue that we are facing in this city. It's between the rich and the have-not. And we don't have, and most of us really don't have. And the rich is a very few group of people that is controlling our system. And we need to eliminate the career politician, reform our government, and start all over again. Because that's one of the biggest issues, the career politician, the machine who is controlling our everything in our city, from the judges, the city hall, the legislators, the senators. So we just need to reform our government, start all over again.
Every time there's a crime in the city, I think we have to acknowledge that it's not just the person who committed the crime that it's fault, but it's decades of failed political leadership and policy at fault as well. Right now, New Orleans has more than twice the national average of adult functional illiteracy. So you know that our public school systems are failing our children. And if our public school systems are failing our children, there's a lot of jobs that they will not be able to apply for, even if those jobs are open. So one of my first tenets to address this intersectional issue is I'm pledging for 100% adult literacy across the board by 2025. I plan to greatly increase the funding of the New Orleans Public Library for adult literacy remediation programs so that people who were failed by our school systems, which the city council has no control over what OPSB does, then at least we can make it up on the back end. Beyond that, I am pledging for a universal community college for all our residents. I think that's the way the national conversation is going, and I believe it's an investment in these vocational trainings, in these entry-level positions. We can get people moving into entry-level positions where they can then pursue their education after the fact, but now they have a working job that they can go through. And beyond that, what are our jobs paying? I heard one of the mayoral candidates say nothing stops a bullet like a job, and I applaud that approach. But I don't think it necessarily recognizes the fact that the recent study said that a median income required to live comfortably, not high off the hog, but comfortably in New Orleans is about $65,000 a year. I just got promoted at work. I supervise a dozen people at a time, and I'm not even making that. So I'm not living comfortably. If I get elected to city council, I'll be making over that, so then I'll be living comfortably. But beyond that, I'm not there at that point. So I think we need to invest in a higher minimum wage. Some people have been with Fight for 15. I'd like to go even further. $18 an hour, I think, is what's needed to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. And beyond that, we need to move towards a universal basic income model because not everybody can work. Some people have to take care of their elderly parents or an autistic child. And so beyond that, we need to have a lanyard dividend that is getting a little bit of money to everybody in the community so that they can survive.
Thank you, Mr. Nowak. This panel, these questions have been really exciting. This is a sea change from where we were 5 years ago as a community, just the way that we're talking about crime. I applaud all the answers that have been given. Since being on the council, I have fought to have better technology, license plate readers, other things, so we're using technology rather than just manpower as it relates to the police department. Moving forward, we have to better deploy the officers that we have, get them out of cars and back to community policing, on bikes, interacting with our citizens. One of the things I'm working on right now is a pre-arrest diversion program, which would allow a police officer interacting with a young man who could say, you know what, today you're not going to jail. Today you're going to go to a program, and you're going to have to be in that program. You're going to have to commit to that program. And what that does is it allows a positive interaction between a police officer and a young man before he's 17 years old. And that is going to change how we think about the police, and that's going to change how the police think about our community. All of that's not enough. At the end of the day, Dr. Joe Bouie is absolutely right. We are talking about a symptom on the news every night when we talk about crime. We have to talk about investing in our citizens on the front end, early childhood care, real workforce development, real jobs program. Right now we have an issue, how do we keep water out of our homes and out of our cars? Well, one way to do that is to dig ponds and water retention ponds and canals and bioswales. Well, that is a jobs program. You don't have to have a college degree to dig a hole. And digging a hole gives water a place to go rather than in your home, rather than your car. But I am just so excited that we are actually talking about the real issues here tonight, rather than let's throw another million at police or throw another million at the DA's office. Talking about how to help people so they make better decisions.
We are almost at an end great conversation. There have been some very progressive comments. There have been some socialist comments, which I love. I'm a closet socialist. Let's have a quick radical conversation, because what you all just talked about, the root cause. So an economist would tell us that the more skills an individual has, the higher their wages, which gets back to our education system. We've also talked quite a bit about how many assets in this city we do not have control over as citizens of New Orleans, nor does the city council or the legislative branch, or the administrative branch, the mayor's office. Quick, yes or no, really try hard to stick to it. Other cities have city councils and their mayors have direct control of their school systems, of their school boards. They're not elected. At best, the city council or the mayor appoints the school board. This is a radical question. I just want to get a response. What do you guys think? Starting with you, Jason. Yes or no?
I'd be in favor.
I would be in favor of yes. It's too important not to.
In favor of putting the school under city control? Yeah, absolutely. My platform is talking about pre-K and post-12 because I can't really do anything.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we're NOLA, we're not Louisiana. Municipalities need to have control of how we run our cities, and that goes from education to gun safety legislation and so many other issues.
Simple answer, yes. You look at what Mayor de Blasio did with free early childhood education for those kids throughout New York City.
That's interesting. Thank you guys. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your succinctness. I want to thank you guys for staying throughout. I think we still have 90% of you all.
I'm in District 8, and it's a shame that we do not have any representation of District 8. This building belongs to District 8. And not one candidate showed up for tonight's board. That's all I want to see. And they weren't invited.
Right, and just to be clear, we did have this event in District A because District D and the Fairgrounds area in particular doesn't have that many facilities capable of handling something like this. And so this is the result. Can you guys make a 1-minute concluding comment? Starting with you, Jared.
Thank you, Julius, and thank you to the Neighborhood Association presidents for having us tonight. I want to thank the rest of the panel because there was some great discussion here tonight. I've proudly represented District D, one of the most diverse districts since being elected in February of 2014. Our work isn't done. I will continue to promote the strong leadership that you have come to expect over the years. Looking at progressive policies, passing legislation that benefits the community, benefits our children, and benefits the city as a whole. The success of New Orleans depends on what we do collectively together. I appreciate you being here tonight. I'm number 73, Jared C. Brossett, on the ballot. I kindly ask for your vote and your support. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. I want to echo both Jason and Julius's sentiments regarding this progressive conversation that we're having. I can't tell you how proud I am to be a part of it. So thank you for having me. Joel Jackson running for District D. Vote JoelJackson.com is where you can see my platform. I'm running on criminal justice reform, a higher living minimum wage, $15 an hour, $17.50 an hour in the tourism industry. I know how we can get that done with incentivizing the businesses that operate in that sector. Affordable housing through community stabilization. I want to get rid of the traffic cameras. We got to stop treating our citizens like walking ATMs, right? We already tax people, you already pay your taxes. For traffic cameras that don't have much to do with traffic safety or public safety. We got this current administration just talk about slot machines over the track. We're all slot machines. They're just pulling us again. You can put a stop to that. That's low-hanging fruit. But I agree with everyone about the systemic changes that we have to make as a society. And that's a long haul, but we got to start somewhere. And I think this conversation tonight is a good beginning. Thank you.
I also want to thank the presidents of the associations for putting this together. And thank you all for coming to actually be engaged in what, without question, is the most important election we've had in quite some time in this city. And as I said earlier, I'm offering myself because as one who has served 40 plus years in this community, I bring a unique set of skills and knowledge to the table. As the council at large, I look forward to working with the council and the mayor and with you, the citizens, because as a social scientist, I can talk about the evidence-based piece. If you want to talk about drug treatment, I developed drug treatment course. I was a co-founder, education. I just happen to be fortunate enough to have the knowledge and skills that we need at this point in time to work with the council and the mayor and you, the citizens, to truly address those community issues we have. And as a community, I'm the only professional change agent in this race. And so I look forward to serving you. I look forward to your vote. And I'm number 50 on the ballot, and I ask you to consider voting for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation for tonight. We deserve better. We deserve new leadership. We deserve a vision. We deserve the quality of life that we work so hard to develop. And the only way we're going to have that quality of life or to receive that type of lifestyle if we get rid of the career politicians, the ones who are destroying our community. And this is what we really need to look at. I am the only candidate with the experience to bring the jobs and opportunity to this community. I am the only candidate with government experience from the office of the governor all the way down to the nonprofit agencies. We can change the way we do business in the city of New York, but we're going to change the way we vote. And that's the only way we're going to change our government and improve the condition and the quality of life of the citizens of New Orleans. And I'm asking you to please give me some consideration. I am not part of the political establishment. I am not part of no political machine. I am an independent candidate, and I'm paying for my own campaign. Thank you. Kenneth Cutno, number 51.
I'd like to thank everyone who came early and stayed through the entire proceedings. And I'd like to thank both the candidates and specifically all the neighborhood associations put this on. Ms. Clevenger with the Fairgrounds Triangle Neighborhood Association, thank you for the invite. 7th Ward Neighborhood Association, Esplanade Ridge Treme Civic Association, and Desai Area Neighborhood Association. This has been the most substantial policy debate that there has been so far in this race, as Mr. Williams said, and it's been a pleasure to participate in that. My name is David Nowak. I'm number 56 on the ballot, and I was running to give a new conversation, some things that have not been talked about, some added added conversation to the mix. So I feel like in some ways, the main mission to run has been accomplished, but now as I get closer and closer to the finish line, I realize how many people are desperate and how many people need serious reform, and so I've been redoubling my efforts, sleeping only about 4 hours a day, spending only my own campaign money, but it's been well worth it. Thank you for your time.
Well, David, I tell you, you're not the only one spending your own money on a race. I'm with you too on that. I'll say this to you. I, in the past 3 years, have proven that I am willing to stand with the people of the city of New Orleans. From the very first council meeting I was in, I had to vote on the Holy Cross project. I met with that community. They did not want that project in that community. They said it was out of sync with what their community needed, and they said that the financing was shaky at best. And to date, not a single shovel has been put in the ground. The community was absolutely, positively right. And I feel good about the fact that I get my cues and take my cues from the people of this city. I've stood with them. They have not let me down, and I won't let them down. I stood up when we needed more money at 911 because we didn't have enough 911 operators. That's why people were getting put on hold. That's why home invasions were turning into sexual assaults, not because we didn't have enough police, we didn't have enough call takers and dispatchers. I fought for better technology, and I have fought for the New Orleans Therapeutic Day program, which provides mental health services for kids so they can get back into their school after they suffer from PTSD, and I will keep fighting.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Y'all have been excellent candidates. Wait, I'm not on? Okay. Thank you all. And I really appreciate you recognizing how much time and effort we put in to these questions, because they do come from the community and represent a majority of voices that we wanted to bring together around these issues that we keep hearing over and over again. So thank you for recognizing that effort that we took to make these questions substantial. And we appreciate your thoughtful answers, the many points of view, and the many great ideas that you put across. And thank you for coming. That's really important. And thank you, our neighborhood association presidents, and we really appreciate everybody that came and stayed tonight. And I hope that you had a real learning experience here that will help inform your vote and help inform how you talk to your neighbors about this coming election. Because as Dr. Joe Bouie said, this is probably one of the most important elections we're going to see in a long time. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, Julius. Kimro, great job.